You mentioned pressure to deliver a performance to people. I'm guessing you're talking about your family, your mom, your dad, which shapes who you are and shapes a lot of your production. I'm sure everyone's tried to analyze you and your parents, but can you speak on that briefly? Because you watched, we're influenced by our parents. I know I am, and I know what you mean. Part of what I do is because it comes from me and I love it. And part of what I do, I'm sure I'm still trying to get the approval and attention of my parents who divorced when I was 7. And that's just something I'm gonna live with.
Look, I think it's one of those things, you don't need to be a fully paid up Freudian or psychoanalyst or defender of psychotherapy to accept a basic fact. The way that we are as adults sits on an emotional base that was formed in childhood. And a lot of the behaviors that we manifest as adults can be traced back, sometimes arduously and nebulously, but clearly back to things that happened to us as children. And this is very boring. It's like, hang on a minute, I'm 50 years old and you're telling me that, what I'm doing now, today, dates back to something that went on with my father or mother. This is an insult. It could seem like a humiliation. It isn't really. And I think the best thing we can do is to own up to it, to recognize it, share it with others. We're all the products of our childhoods and our adult identities, are sitting on a very thin crust of adulthood, and then comes the childhood. So my own life, sure, I experienced parents who didn't from the first think I was terrific. They had problems, and that's made me a little harder than most on myself, and it's meant that my own decency as a human being is not immediately apparent to me. I feel that there are things I need to prove to those who might want to love me or like me, to those around me. Historically, I haven't liked myself very much. It's been a really big journey to say, I might be okay. I might not be brilliant, but I might be good enough. At the School of Life, we're very keen on this wonderful British psychoanalyst who was writing in the 60s, broadcasting a lot as well. This man, Donald Winnicott, was a pioneer of child psychoanalysis. And he came up with a wonderful phrase. He said that, no parent, and indeed no child and no adult, needs to be perfect. The only thing we all need to be is good enough. And this notion of being good enough, depending on where you're coming from in life, could sound either like the most obvious thing, like, of course I know how to be good enough, and that's fine. Or it could sound almost miraculous. Really? I have permission to be good enough? And for those of our viewers for whom they'll go, wow, can I really be good enough? Is that enough? Is that okay? If you come from a certain sort of background, that's going to be a surprise to you, and probably a journey of real self-acceptance. But a wonderful thing to be able to get to a stage of thinking, am I the most brilliant person that ever lived? No, but no one needs to be. And indeed, it's a kind of psychotic feeling, that structure, to imagine that the only way in which you can live is at the pinnacle of human achievement. I mean, let's get statistics right here. We're living on a planet of 7 billion people. Most of us are incredibly flawed. We don't really know what's going on. We're, maneuvering in the darkness, but that's okay. Once in a while, we make a good call. We behave with generosity and charity towards others, maybe even to ourselves, and that's enough.
Your dad was a workaholic, managed a lot of money in Switzerland, taught you maybe you didn't want to do that stuff. Maybe you saw that, as in maybe that wasn't the end-all goal for you. And mom, nurturing?
I've been banned from talking about my specific parents. I've caused so many upsets. So without wishing to be cagey, they did a brilliant job given who they were and what they lived through. And they did the best they could. I think, past around, I think the cutoff date is probably around 43. You need to stop griping about your parents and simply have a blanket thing of like, they did what they could. And I think that's not to whitewash the question. It's actually a very deep point. Literally, as parents, most parents do what they can. And you always need to look at their parents and where they've come from. And, I'm in the business at this stage of, charity and love to all who try. And so, yeah.